What happens when the purest moment of a woman's life becomes the catalyst for her utter destruction? In the sterile, white-walled quiet of a maternity ward holding her 2 newborn babies, Elara Thorne believed her world was complete. She had the perfect life, the billionaire husband, and now a family. But the man who walked through the door wasn't the loving father she expected. He was a harbinger of ruin. His words colder than the November rain lashing against the window. He didn't come bearing gifts. He came with a severance, a demand, and a new woman's name on his lips. This is the story of how a new mother was thrown out with nothing but her infants, and how the mistress who took her place discovered the devastating truth behind a billionaire's signature. The scent of antiseptic and baby powder mingled in the air of the private suite at Lenox Hill Hospital. It was a smell Elara Thorne decided was the scent of pure joy. In her arms, swaddled in matching blue and pink blankets, lay Leo and Luna, her twin children, not more than 10 hours old. Every tiny breath they took seemed to sync with the beating of her own heart. After years of trying of quiet heartbreaks and clinical disappointments, they were finally here. Her world, once a sprawling canvas of anxieties, had narrowed to this perfect, peaceful moment. She adjusted Luna's tiny cap, her fingers tracing the delicate curve of the baby's ear. Julian would be here any minute. Her husband, the Julian Thorne of Thorne Enterprises, a man whose ambition had carved a new skyline for the city, was about to meet his son and daughter. She pictured his face the way his guarded corporate facade would melt when he held them. He'd been distant lately, stressed with a new acquisition in Singapore, he'd said. Long nights at the office, hushed phone calls. But this, she thought, this would change everything. The twins would be the glue, the anchor to tether his wandering focus back home. The door swished open, and there he was. He looked impeccable, as always, in a tailored Tom Ford suit that probably cost more than the hospital bed she was sitting on. But his face was a mask of cold granite. There were no flowers, no balloon, no trace of the ecstatic father she had envisioned. Julian. She breathed a smile blooming on her tired face. They're here. They're perfect. He didn't move towards her. He stood by the door, his hands in his pockets, his gaze flicking from the babies to her with an unnerving detachment. We need to talk, Elara. The joy in the room curdled. His tone wasn't that of a new father. It was the tone he used in boardrooms before a hostile takeover. What is it? Is something wrong with the acquisition? She asked, her voice small. The acquisition went through, he said, his voice flat. He took a step forward, his expensive leather shoes making no sound on the linoleum floor. I'm leaving you. The words hung in the air so alien and sharp they felt like physical blows. Elara blinked, certain she had misheard that the exhaustion and painkillers were making her hallucinate. What are you talking about? Julian, look at them. This is Leo, and this is Luna. Our family. She tried to hold one of the babies up for him to see a desperate offering. He barely glanced at them. I've filed for divorce. My lawyer, Mr. Davies from Sullivan & Cromwell, will be in touch with yours. I've been seeing someone. Her name is Isabella Rossi. I'm in love with her. Each word was a measured, precise stab. Isabella Rossi. The name sounded like expensive perfume and whispered secrets. Elara felt the blood drain from her face. The warmth of the blankets in her arms was the only thing keeping her from shattering into a million pieces. You can't be serious, she whispered, her throat closing up. Julian, I just gave birth to your children. Our children. A fact that complicates things but doesn't change them, he said, his voice devoid of emotion. I've made arrangements. The settlement will be adequate. Enough for you to live comfortably, provided you don't cause any trouble. Tears streamed down her face, hot and silent. Adequate. I'm your wife. For 8 years, I have been by your side. I gave up my architectural career to support you when Thorn Enterprises was just a blueprint on our kitchen table, a sacrifice for which you were well compensated, he countered, his jaw tight. You lived in a penthouse on Park Avenue. You wanted for nothing. I wanted you, she cried, her voice cracking, waking Luna, who began to fuss. I wanted a husband, a partner, not a benefactor. He seemed irritated by the baby's cry. This is not the time or place for hysterics, Elara. Be sensible. My relationship with Isabella is serious. We're moving forward. The penthouse is being prepared for her. I need you to have your things moved out by the end of the week. The cruelty of it knocked the air from her lungs. Thrown out. She was being thrown out of her home, the home she had painstakingly designed and decorated while she was still in a hospital bed with their newborn children. Where am I supposed to go? She asked, her voice trembling as she rocked Luna gently. That's for you to figure out. You're a resourceful woman, he said, turning to leave. He paused at the door, his back to her. A car will take you from the hospital tomorrow. Not to the penthouse. It will take you to a hotel I've booked for 2 weeks. After that, you're on your own. The joint accounts have been frozen. A new account with a preliminary sum will be opened in your name. Don't try to fight me on this, Elara. My legal team is the best in the country. You will lose, and you will get far less. He didn't look back. He didn't ask to hold his children. He just walked out, leaving behind a silence more profound and terrifying than any sound Elara had ever heard. The scent of antiseptic no longer felt joyful. It was sterile, cold, and empty. She looked down at the 2 innocent faces sleeping in her arms, her tears falling onto their tiny blankets. Her perfect world hadn't just cracked. It had been dynamited, and she was standing alone in the rubble. The discharge from the hospital the next day was a surreal, humiliating blur. The nurses who had cooed over the twins now looked at her with a mixture of pity and discomfort. The promised car was there, a discreet black town car, not Julian's usual chauffeured Bentley. The driver was polite but distant, his eyes refusing to meet hers in the rearview mirror. As the car pulled away from the grand entrance of Lenox Hill, Elara looked down at the 2 car seats beside her. Leo and Luna slept oblivious to the fact that they were for all intents and purposes homeless. She had nowhere to go. The driver had his instructions. The Meridian Hotel on 57th Street. A place for tourists and business travelers, not a new mother with 2 infants and a lifetime packed into 2 suitcases. The hotel was nice enough, but it felt like a gilded cage. The staff was professional, but every polite smile felt like a judgment. For 2 days, Elara operated on autopilot. Feed the babies. Change the babies. Rock the babies to sleep. In the moments between, a suffocating panic would wash over her. She tried to call Julian, but his number went straight to voicemail. She tried his assistant, a woman she'd known for years, who informed her in a clipped professional tone that all communication must now go through Mr. Davies. On the 3rd day, reality hit her like a freight train. She tried to order diapers and formula through an app using the credit card from their joint account. Declined. She tried another. Declined. A cold dread crept up her spine. She logged into her mobile banking app. The familiar, comfortable balance of the joint checking account was gone. In its place was a 0. As he'd promised, a new account had been opened in her name, Elara Hale. Her maiden name. The The balance was $25,000. To Julian, it was pocket change. To her, it was a severance package. An insult. It wouldn't last 2 months in New York City, not with 2 children. Panic gave way to a chilling clarity. He was truly erasing her, not just from his life, but from the life they had built. She was no longer Mrs. Thorne. She was Elara Hale, a single mother in a temporary hotel room with dwindling funds. She had one person she could call. Her best friend from college, Chloe Sterling. Chloe wasn't just a friend. She was a pit bull of a litigator at a small but aggressive family law firm. Her hands trembled as she dialed the number. Chloe picked up on the second ring. Elara. Is everything okay? I've been trying to reach you. How are the little ones? The sound of her friend's warm, steady voice broke the dam. A sob escaped Elara's lips, raw and ragged. Chloe, he left me. She recounted the entire story, the words tumbling out between gasps and tears. The hospital, Isabella, Rossi, the frozen, accounts, the hotel. Chloe was silent on the other end, letting her speak. When Elara finished, her voice hoarse, Chloe's response was immediate and fierce. Okay. Stay right where you are. Don't speak to anyone from his side. Don't sign anything. I'm on my way. An hour later, Chloe burst into the hotel room, her fiery red hair a stark contrast to the room's beige decor. She took one look at Elara, pale and exhausted, and the 2 tiny babies sleeping in their portable cribs, and her expression hardened. She hugged Elara tightly. He's a monster, Chloe whispered into her hair. But monsters can be slain. We're going to fight him, Elara. We are going to bleed him dry. How? Elara asked, pulling back her eyes puffy. He has Sullivan and Cromwell. He has endless money. I have this. She gestured around the impersonal hotel room. You have the truth. And you have his children, Chloe said, her eyes glinting with strategic fire. That's leverage. But first things first, we need to get you out of here. This place is a money pit, and it's psychologically damaging. We need to find you a place to live, a real place. For the next week, Chloe became her general. While Elara cared for the newborns, Chloe worked the phones. She discovered that finding a short-term affordable apartment in New York for a woman with no current income, no credit history in her own name, and 2 babies was nearly impossible. The $25,000 was a prison, enough to disqualify her for most aid, but not nearly enough to secure a proper home. Desperation began to set in again. Her 2 weeks at the hotel were almost up. One rainy afternoon, Chloe came back to the hotel, looking tired but determined. I have a lead, she said, shrugging off her wet coat. It's not Park Avenue. It's not even close. It's a garden-level apartment in a brownstone in Astoria, Queens. The landlady is an old client of mine, a tough old bird named Mrs. Gable. I helped her with her husband's will pro bono a few years back. She owes me a favor. It's small, but it's safe, and she's willing to rent it to you month to month, no credit check if you pay 3 months up front. Astoria. It felt like a different country, a world away from this manicured hedges and doormen of her old life, but it was a lifeline. I'll take it, Elara said without hesitation. The move was as grim as her eviction had been. They took a taxi, the twins' car seats, 2 suitcases, and a box of baby supplies filling the trunk and back seat. As the taxi crossed the Queensboro Bridge, Elara looked back at the glittering Manhattan skyline, the Thorne Enterprises Tower, standing tallest of all, a monument to the man who had discarded her. The apartment was exactly as Chloe had described it. Small. The living room and kitchenette were one room with a tiny bedroom and a bathroom off to the side. The furniture was old but clean. The windows looked out onto a small, slightly overgrown patch of garden. It was a world away from the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, but as Mrs. Gable, a woman with a kind face, etched with the lines of a long life, handed her the keys. Elara felt something she hadn't felt in weeks, a flicker of agency. This wasn't a home Julian had bought. It was a home she had secured, however tenuously. That night, after settling the babies in their travel cribs in the bedroom, Elara sat on the lumpy sofa in the dim light of the living room. The sounds of the city were different here, not the distant hum of traffic, but the rumble of the N train, the laughter of people from the street, the bark of a neighbor's dog. It was loud and gritty and real. She looked at her hands, no longer adorned with the massive diamond Julian had given her. They were just hands. Hands that could change diapers, hold her children, and she hoped rebuild a life from the ashes. The fall had been brutal, but here in this small basement apartment in Queens, the ground felt solid beneath her feet for the first time. The first few months in Astoria were a crucible. Life became a relentless cycle of feeding, changing, and soothing, all conducted within the cramped confines of the garden apartment. Sleep was a forgotten luxury measured in 45-minute increments. The ghost of her past life was a constant, unwelcome visitor. Sometimes, while warming a bottle at 3 a.m., she would catch her reflection in the dark kitchen window and not recognize the woman staring back, her hair, unkempt, dark circles under her eyes, wearing a stained t-shirt. It was a far cry from the poised Mrs. Thorne, who hosted charity galas. Yet amid the exhaustion, something was taking root. It was a fierce, primal sense of purpose centered entirely on Leo and Luna. Their helpless dependence gave her an iron will. Every gurgle, every tiny hand that wrapped around her finger was a reason to keep going. Mrs. Gable proved to be a godsend. The gruff landlady would often appear at her door with a container of homemade soup, or an offer to watch the twins for an hour, so Elara could shower in peace. She never asked about Elara's past, but her knowing, compassionate eyes said she understood enough. Meanwhile, the legal battle with Julian was a slow, grinding torture. Chloe was relentless, filing motions and demanding financial disclosures. Julian's lawyers from Sullivan and Cromwell were masters of the delay tactic. They'd send over thousands of pages of redacted documents, drowning them in paperwork. Their initial settlement offer was an insult. A one-time payment of $1 million plus child support that, while seemingly generous, was a pittance compared to Julian's estimated net worth of over $3 billion. The offer came with a non-disclosure agreement so restrictive it would essentially gag her for life. "Don't even think about it," Chloe had said, tossing the papers onto Elara's small kitchen table. "This isn't a settlement, it's a threat. He's trying to buy your silence and erase his paternal responsibility for as cheaply as possible." But $1 million? Elara started the sum, seeming impossibly large from her current vantage point. "Is what he spends on watches in a year," Chloe cut her off. "No. We fight. But to fight, we need ammunition. And more importantly, you need to build a life for yourself outside of him. The courts look favorably on a parent who is actively working to support themselves." Chloe's words sparked something in Elara. For 8 years, her identity had been Julian Thorne's wife. Before that, she had been Elara Hale, a top-of-her-class graduate from Columbia's School of Architecture, an associate at a prestigious firm with a bright future. She had given it all up when Julian's startup began to consume all his time, convincing her that her support at home and at his corporate events was more valuable. One night, after the twins were finally asleep, She dug out her old portfolio from a dusty box under the bed. The pages were filled with elegant designs, innovative floor plans, and ambitious projects. A fire she thought had long been extinguished flickered to life. She couldn't take a full-time job, not with the twins. But she could work from here. She used some of her dwindling funds to buy a used high-performance laptop. She reactivated her professional licenses. She started small, going on freelance websites, bidding on minor projects, designing a kitchen remodel for a family in Ohio, drafting deck plans for a contractor in California. The pay was a pittance, a few $100s here and there. But it wasn't about the money. It was about proving to herself that she could still create, still build. Her first paycheck, a direct deposit of $500, made her cry. It was the first money she had earned on her own in nearly a decade. She held her sleeping babies close that night, whispering to them, "Mommy's going to build us a house one day. A real home." Slowly she began to find a rhythm. Work was crammed into the precious hours when the babies slept. Her tiny apartment became her office. Blueprints shared space with baby bottles on the kitchen table. The hum of her laptop became a familiar sound alongside the white noise machine in the bedroom. She built a small but steady list of remote clients. Her confidence, so long dormant, began to return. She was no longer just a victim. She was an architect, a mother, a survivor. She even started to find beauty in her new life. The weekend walks to Astoria Park, pushing the double stroller under the shadow of the Hellgate Bridge, the friendly nod from the owner of the local Greek bakery, the simple, profound joy of watching Leo's first real smile or hearing Luna's first laugh. These were moments of happiness that were entirely her own, untainted by the Thorne name or money. One afternoon, while scrolling through a newsfeed during a rare moment of quiet, a photo stopped her cold. It was from a society gala at the Met. Julian stood with his arm around a stunningly beautiful woman with dark, intelligent eyes and a cascade of black hair. The caption read, "Billionaire developer Julian Thorne and his new partner, celebrated art curator Isabella Rossi, make their public debut." Isabella was radiant in a Valentino gown, looking every bit the part of a billionaire's consort. A pang of the old hurt shot through Ilara. It was sharp and familiar. But then something else surfaced. She looked at the photo, at the forced smile on Julian's face, and the almost contemplative look in Isabella's eyes, and felt a strange sense of detachment. That was another world, a world of performance and pretense. Her world was here in this small apartment with the scent of her babies and the quiet satisfaction of her own hard work. The slow ascent was arduous, but the view she was beginning to realize was entirely her own. Julian Thorne's world was a symphony of success. The Singapore acquisition had been a triumph, adding another jewel to his corporate crown. He and Isabella were the city's new power couple, their faces gracing the pages of Forbes and Vanity Fair. He had installed her in the Park Avenue penthouse, which he had completely redecorated to her tastes, erasing every trace of Ilara. He bought her art, funded a new wing at the Guggenheim in her name, and showered her with gifts that would make a sultan blush a rare Patek Philippe, watch a vintage Aston Martin, a private showing of the new couture collection in Paris. He was performing the role of the man who had it all. Yet in the quiet moments, a strange dissonance hummed beneath the surface. He had expected this new life to be an exhilarating, untroubled paradise. But it wasn't. Isabella was not like Ilara. Where Ilara had been warm, accommodating, and content to live in his shadow, Isabella was a challenge. She was brilliant, fiercely independent, with a passion for her work that rivaled his own. She would engage him in sharp intellectual debates about everything from geopolitical trends to the nuances of postmodern art. He found it intoxicating, but also unsettling. She didn't seem to need him in the way Alara had. Sometimes he would catch her looking at him with an expression he couldn't decipher. One evening he presented her with the keys to a brand new yacht he'd named the Isabella. He expected elation. Instead, she looked at the keys in her hand, and then back at him, a faint, melancholic smile on her lips. "It's beautiful, Julian," she said, her voice soft. "But you know you don't have to do this." "I want to," he insisted. "I want to give you everything." "You already have," she replied, turning to look out the vast window at the city lights. "You have me. Isn't that supposed to be the prize?" Her words left him feeling hollow. He was using money and power, the only languages he was truly fluent in, to express his affection, but he had the growing suspicion that Isabella was fluent in a language he couldn't speak. His right-hand man, and the only person he considered a friend, Marcus Vance, the COO of Thorn Enterprises, saw the cracks forming. Marcus was a quiet, observant man who had been with Julian from the beginning. "The divorce is getting messy," Julian Marcus said one afternoon in Julian's stark, minimalist office. "Their lawyer. This Chloe Sterling is a shark. She's demanding full forensic accounting of the holding companies in the Cayman Islands. Let Davies handle it. Stall them. Bury them in paper," Julian said dismissively, scrolling through market reports on his tablet. Marcus hesitated, then pressed on. "And the optics aren't great. Kicking your wife out right after she gives birth to your children. It's making some of the board members nervous. The ones with families." Julian's head snapped up, his eyes flashing with anger. "My personal life is my own, and I'm providing for them. I sent a perfectly reasonable offer. An offer that was a rounding error for you, and you know it," Marcus said calmly. "Look, I'm not judging you for falling for Isabella. She's a remarkable woman. But the way you handled Alara, it was cruel, and it's going to cost you more in the long run than a generous settlement would have." "It's the principle of the thing," Julian snarled. "Alara thinks she's entitled to half of what I built. She was with you when you were building it," Marcus reminded him gently. "Remember when we were trying to get that first round of funding? She was the one who redesigned the pitch deck, made it look 100 times more professional. She hosted those dinners for investors in your tiny apartment. She was part of it." Julian waved his hand, dismissing the memory. "That was a long time ago. People change. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a reservation at Per Se. Isabella has been wanting to go." But Marcus's words lingered. That night at the Michelin-starred restaurant, as Isabella spoke passionately about a new exhibit she was curating, Julian found his mind drifting. He tried to picture his children. Leo and Luna. He knew their names, but he couldn't conjure their faces. He had never held them, never smelled that newborn scent Alara used to talk about. A sudden sharp pang of something hit him. It wasn't regret, he told himself. It was a momentary curiosity, a loose end. Isabella seemed to notice his distraction. "Is everything all right, Julian?" "Just thinking about the divorce," he lied easily. She looked at him, her gaze penetrating. "How is she doing, Alara?" The question surprised him. "I don't know. Fine, I assume. She's being taken care of." Isabella took a sip of her wine, her dark eyes watching him over the rim of the glass. "You know, for a man who builds empires, you seem to have a penchant for scorched earth tactics in your personal life. You do realize that a victory that leaves nothing but ashes isn't really a victory at all, don't you?" Her words were like a surgeon's scalpel, precise and cutting. For the first time, Julian felt a flicker of doubt. He was Julian Thorn. He never lost. He always won. But as he looked at the beautiful, enigmatic woman across the table, he wondered what exactly the prize was. He had the woman, the empire, the power. But his new gilded cage felt strangely empty, and the ghost of the family he had just destroyed was beginning to haunt its opulent, silent halls. Months bled into a year. The twins celebrated their first birthday with a small cupcake and a candle in the Astoria apartment. Leo was walking a determined little explorer, while Luna was content to sit and observe her intelligent eyes, taking in everything. Elara's freelance business had grown beyond her wildest dreams. Through word of mouth, she had landed a major contract redesigning a boutique hotel in Brooklyn. The work was demanding, but it was hers. She had hired a part-time nanny, a kind college student, allowing her to dedicate focused hours to her work. She was finally truly standing on her own 2 feet. Her life was small, but it was full. She had Mrs. Gable's friendship, her children's laughter, and the deep satisfaction of her own success. The bitterness towards Julian had faded, replaced by a steely resolve. The legal battle was no longer about revenge. It was about securing her children's future and getting what she was owed for her years of contribution. Chloe, true to her word, had been a warrior. She had fought every delay, every motion, to dismiss with a tenacity that infuriated Julian's high-priced legal team. One rainy Tuesday, Chloe called, her voice buzzing with an energy Elara hadn't heard before. "I need you to come to my office. Now. And I need you to bring the big storage box, the one with all the old papers from the early days of your marriage. The one in Mrs. Gable's storage unit. Chloe, that thing is massive. It's full of old tax returns receipts. Bring it, Elara. All of it. I've got a hunch." A few hours later, Elara was in Chloe's cluttered downtown office. The box sat in the middle of the floor, smelling faintly of dust and memories. For the next several hours, they sifted through a decade of a life together documented on paper. Old vacation photos, restaurant receipts, and mountains of financial documents. "What exactly are we looking for?" Elara asked, wiping dust from her hands. "I don't know," Chloe admitted, her brow furrowed in concentration. Julian's lawyers provided the standard incorporation documents for Thorne Enterprises. Everything is in his name. But you were married when he founded it. In New York, that means the appreciation in the company's value is marital property. They're fighting us on that, saying his genius is separate property. It's a weak argument, but with his money he can drag it out for years. I'm looking for a smoking gun, something they've overlooked, something he's overlooked. They worked late into the evening, fueled by coffee and takeout pizza. Just as Elara was about to give up, her fingers brushed against a thick leather-bound folder at the very bottom of the box. The label, written in her own neat cursive, said Thorne Holdings, LLC. Initial formation, 2015. This was the original holding company. Elara murmured more to herself than to Chloe. Before he restructured everything into Thorne Enterprises. It was just an LLC he started when he got his first angel investor. Chloe's eyes lit up. "Let me see that." She took the folder and began carefully leafing through the pages. It was mostly standard legal boilerplate. Then she stopped. She read a page, then read it again, her eyes widening. "Oh, you have got to be kidding me," she whispered, a slow grin spreading across her face. "That arrogant son of a bitch." "What is it?" Elara leaned forward, her heart pounding. Chloe turned the folder around and pointed to a paragraph on a signature page. "Read this. It's Article 4, Section B." Elara read the dense legal text. It was a clause she vaguely remembered signing. At the time, Julian's first major investor, a cautious old money type, had insisted on certain protections. The clause stipulated that to secure the intellectual property, the proprietary software algorithms Julian had designed, the founding assets, were to be held jointly by the principal and his spouse to protect them from being treated as a sole asset in a potential future bankruptcy. It was a standard spousal protection clause in startup agreements of that era. She, Ilara Hale Thorne, was listed as a non-operational silent founding partner of the original LLC. Her signature was right there next to Julian's. When Julian had dissolved the LLC and folded its assets into the new, larger Thorne Enterprises, this foundational clause, this bedrock of ownership for the core IP, had been legally transferred along with it. "What does this mean?" Ilara asked, her voice trembling. Chloe leaned back in her chair, looking like the cat that had just swallowed the entire canary factory. "It means, my dear friend, that you don't just have a claim to the marital appreciation of his company. You have a claim to the foundation of his company. You are not just the ex-wife asking for a piece of the pie. You are a silent partner who has been sitting on the board of directors' deed to the entire bakery. He either forgot, or in his supreme arrogance, thought this dusty old document would never see the light of day. He's been fighting a war on the wrong front, and we just found the secret tunnel into his throne room." Ilara stared at the document, at her own signature from a lifetime ago, a signature she had made as a supportive wife, never dreaming of its power. A wave of dizziness washed over her. His entire empire. Chloe continued, her voice low and triumphant. Every skyscraper, every hotel, every acquisition was built on the back of that initial software. According to this, you are a foundational owner of that IP. He can't sell it, transfer it, or leverage it without your consent. And I'm willing to bet he's done all three a dozen times over. Ilara looked up at her friend, tears welling in her eyes, not of sadness, but of a dizzying, terrifying, and exhilarating sense of power. The ground beneath Julian Thorne's feet had just turned to quicksand, and he had no idea. Julian was growing impatient. The protracted divorce was a gnat buzzing around his head, a constant annoyance. More than that, it was a source of friction with Isabella. She never said it outright, but he could see it in her eyes. She saw the ongoing legal battle as a vulgar and undignified affair. He wanted it to be over. He wanted to prove to her and to the world that his future was with her, completely and irrevocably. He decided on a gesture. A grand gesture. One so monumental, so unprecedented, that it would silence all whispers and demonstrate the magnitude of his devotion. It would also not coincidentally move a significant portion of his assets into her name, shielding them from the prying eyes of Ilara's legal team. It was in his mind a brilliantly elegant solution. He summoned his personal finance lawyers, a different team from the divorce attorneys, to his office. "I want to make a transfer," he announced, standing before them with the air of a Roman emperor. "I want to sign over a controlling interest of Thorne Enterprises 51% to Ms. Isabella Rossi. I want it structured as an irrevocable gift. I want the paperwork drawn up by Friday." The lawyers exchanged shocked glances. The senior partner, a man named Henderson, cleared his throat. "Mr. Thorne, Julian, a move of this magnitude, it's virtually unheard of. The tax implications alone are staggering. And to give up a controlling interest in your own company? I'm not giving it up," Julian corrected him. "I'm securing it. With my partner. Isabella is a brilliant strategist. This solidifies our future both personally and professionally. Just do it." His command was absolute. The lawyers, though deeply unsettled, began the Herculean task of drafting the documents. It was the largest private transfer of assets they had ever witnessed. Julian planned the signing with theatrical flair. It wouldn't be in a stuffy law office. He rented out the exclusive Per Se restaurant for the entire evening. It would be just the two of them, the lawyers to witness, and a Michelin-starred meal to celebrate. He told Isabella to dress for a special occasion, but kept the details a secret. She arrived looking breathtaking in a simple, elegant black dress her curiosity piqued. The restaurant was empty, except for their table, which was discreetly positioned to offer a stunning view of Columbus Circle and Central Park. The lawyers Henderson and his associate sat at a nearby table, a thick leather portfolio resting before them. "Julian, what is all this?" Isabella asked, a smile playing on her lips, though her eyes were wary. "This," he said, taking her hand, "is our future." After a lavish dinner, Julian nodded to the lawyers. Henderson brought the portfolio over and laid it on the table. Isabella Julian began, his voice resonating with rehearsed sincerity. "I have loved you from the moment I met you. You are my equal, my partner in every sense of the word, and I want to prove that to you. Words are cheap. Actions are what define a man." He opened the portfolio. Inside was a single thick vellum document and a heavy gold-plated fountain pen. "This document," he said, his voice dropping to a dramatic whisper, "makes you the majority shareholder of Thorn Enterprises. I am gifting you 51% of my life's work. Everything I have built I am placing in your hands because my future is worthless without you in it." He slid the document in front of her alongside the pen. He leaned back, a triumphant smile on his face, ready to receive her tears of joy, her declarations of undying love. This was the ultimate checkmate. A gesture of love so powerful it would become a legend in their social circle, and a strategic masterstroke that would neuter Ilara's legal claims. Isabella stared at the document. Her face went pale. She read the first paragraph, her eyes scanning the legal language that transferred billions of dollars of assets into her name. Her hand resting on the table began to tremble. Julian's smile faltered slightly. This wasn't the reaction he had expected. "Isabella." She looked up from the paper, and he was shocked to see that her eyes were glistening with tears. But they were not tears of joy. Her expression was one of profound, soul-crushing sorrow. "You fool," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "You arrogant, beautiful fool. What have you done?" She began to cry. Not the delicate, happy tears he had imagined, but deep, wrenching sobs. She pushed the document away from her as if it were poison. Julian was stunned into silence. The lawyers looked on aghast. This grand gesture, his masterstroke, was imploding. "I don't understand," he stammered. "This is for you, for us." "No," she wept, shaking her head. "This isn't for us. This is for you. This is another acquisition. Another transaction. You think this piece of paper is love? You think you can buy my heart the same way you buy a skyscraper?" Before Julian could process her words, Henderson's phone buzzed urgently. He glanced at the screen, his face turning ashen. He excused himself and walked a few feet away, speaking in a low, frantic tone. A moment later he returned to the table, his professional composure completely gone. "Julian," he said, his voice tight with panic. "That was Davies from Sullivan and Cromwell. They just received a priority courier package from Ilara Thorne's attorney. It's an emergency injunction." An injunction on what grounds? Julian snapped, his frustration boiling over. Henderson swallowed hard. "On the grounds that you are attempting a fraudulent transfer of foundational corporate assets co-owned by a silent partner." He looked at Julian, his eyes wide with disbelief. A silent partner named Ilara Hale Thorne. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. For a moment, Julian couldn't process the words. Silent partner Ilara. It was impossible. A hallucination. "That's absurd," he scoffed, trying to regain control. "She has no such standing. My lawyers vetted everything when the company was incorporated. Apparently not the documents from the original LLC. Henderson shot back, his voice edged with panic and accusation. The one you folded into the C Corp. They have the original formation articles, with her signature, naming her a silent founding partner with a stake in the core intellectual property. The memory hit Julian like a physical blow. A dusty folder, a cautious investor, a signature he'd insisted Ilara provide on a rainy Tuesday a decade ago, calling it a meaningless formality. A formality he had completely and utterly forgotten. In his rush to build his empire, to restructure and expand, he had overlooked the single stone upon which the entire edifice was built. He stared at the document on the table, the transfer of 51% of his company to Isabella. A document that was now not only worthless, but was evidence of a massive illegal attempt to defraud a business partner. His ex-wife. He turned to Isabella, a desperate, confused look on his face. Her sobs had subsided into a quiet, simmering anger. "Why are you crying?" he demanded, his voice cracking. "If you hated this gesture so much, then this is good news for you, isn't it? The deal is off." She looked at him, and for the first time he didn't see the sophisticated art curator or the enchanting woman he loved. He saw a stranger, her eyes filled with a pity that was more painful than any anger. "You still don't get it, do you?" she said, her voice heavy with disappointment. "I cried, Julian, because in this one single grandiose act you proved you have learned nothing. You proved that you see everything, this company me, love itself, as something to be owned, controlled, and transacted. You didn't offer me a partnership. You tried to purchase a queen for your kingdom." She stood up, her movements full of a sudden sharp grace. "I cried because I truly, deeply fell in love with you. And I hoped against all evidence that the man I fell for was buried somewhere underneath the Billionaire. I was wrong. The Billionaire is all that's left." Julian was speechless. The twin revelations, Ilara's legal bombshell and Isabella's emotional evisceration, had left him reeling. The perfectly constructed world he had built for himself was fracturing around him. "Where are you going?" he asked, his voice a hoarse whisper. "I'm going to call a taxi," she said, picking up her clutch. She paused and looked at him one last time. "You know, I met Ilara once, at a charity event years ago before I knew you. She was intelligent, vibrant. You hollowed her out to build your empire, and when she was no longer of use, you discarded her. And you were about to do the same to me, only you dress it up with prettier paper. The pattern is the same." As she walked away, leaving him alone in the cavernous, empty restaurant with his stunned lawyers, another piece of the puzzle clicked into place in Julian's shattered mind. Marcus Vance, his quiet, observant friend, the one who had warned him, the one who had always seemed to have a strangely protective, almost familial respect for Isabella. Vance. Julian breathed the name, tasting like ash. Marcus Vance. What is he to you? Isabella stopped at the door, her back to him. His full name is Marcus Rossi Vance. He's my older brother. The final blow landed. It was a conspiracy, a beautifully orchestrated long-term play. Marcus, his most trusted colleague, had seen the rot in him, the self-destructive narcissism, and had brought in his sister, the one person whose intelligence and integrity Julian might actually respect, to try and save him from himself. Or perhaps to simply bear witness to his inevitable self-immolation. Isabella's tears were not just for the failure of their love. They were for the failure of their mission. Julian hadn't been saved. He had with his own golden pen signed his own death warrant. He sank into his chair, the weight of his ruin pressing down on him. The city lights outside twinkled, oblivious to the fact that the king of this skyline had just been dethroned. The aftermath was swift and brutal. The emergency injunction froze all of Julian's major assets. The revelation of the Founders Clause sent shockwaves through the financial world. Thorn Enterprises' stock plummeted. The board of directors, already nervous about Julian's erratic behavior, called an emergency meeting. The negotiation, when it finally happened, was not in a boardroom at Sullivan and Cromwell, but in Chloe Sterling's modest downtown office. It was a testament to the seismic shift in power. Julian arrived looking diminished. His usual swagger was gone, replaced by a weary, haunted look. He was flanked by his lawyers, who now looked at Chloe not with condescension, but with a grudging respect. Across the table sat Elara. She was poised, calm, and impeccably dressed in a sharp professional suit. Beside her, Chloe watched everything with the keen eye of a hawk. There was no Isabella. There was no Marcus. They had made their move and now faded into the background, leaving the original parties to settle the score. Julian's lead lawyer began with a blustering attempt to challenge the validity of the clause. Chloe shut him down instantly. "Don't waste our time, Mr. Davies," she said, sliding a document across the table. "This is a signed affidavit from the angel investor who insisted on the clause confirming its intent. We also have forensic accountants who have traced the direct lineage of the IP from the LLC to its current state. Your client committed fraud, willful and demonstrable fraud, against a founding partner. Shall we discuss this in open court, or shall we discuss a number?" The threat of public litigation of having his dirty laundry and fraudulent business practices aired for the world to see was the final nail in the coffin. Julian's shoulders slumped in defeat. "What do you want, Elara?" he asked, his voice raspy. It was the first time he had spoken directly to her. Elara looked at the man who had been her entire world, the father of her children, and felt nothing. The anger was gone. The hurt was a distant echo. There was only a quiet strength. "I want what is fair," she said, her voice clear and steady. "I want my children to be secure for their entire lives. And I want what I am owed for my contribution to what you built, a contribution you tried to erase." Chloe laid out their terms. They weren't punitive, they were precise. A 25% stake in Thorn Enterprises to be placed in an ironclad trust managed by a neutral third party. The sole beneficiaries would be Leo and Luna Thorn. From this trust, all their living medical and educational expenses would be paid up to and including postgraduate studies. Upon their 25th birthdays, they would inherit the stake in full. For Elara, the terms were different. She didn't want his company. She wanted her own. She demanded a one-time cash settlement of $200 million, not as alimony, but as a buyout for her foundational share of the IP. She also wanted the Park Avenue penthouse not to live in, but to sell, and the deed to a piece of undeveloped land he owned upstate, a beautiful plot overlooking the Hudson River she had always loved. Julian's lawyers balked at the number. Julian just nodded, a hollowed-out man. He knew he had no choice. He had been so terrified of giving Elara a piece of the pie that he had ended up handing her the entire bakery, and now she was selling it back to him at a premium. He signed the papers. The stroke of the pen felt infinitely heavier than the one he had tried to use to sign his company away to Isabella. One was an act of ego. This was an act of surrender. As he was leaving, he paused at the door and looked at Elara. Are the kids okay?" "They are wonderful," Elara replied, her expression unreadable. "They're happy and healthy." He nodded, a flicker of something regret-loss, a ghost of the man he might have been passing through his eyes. And then he was gone. 6 months later, the New York skyline was bathed in the warm glow of an autumn sunset. On a sprawling plot of land overlooking the Hudson, a new house was being framed. It was a stunning piece of modern architecture, all clean lines, glass, and natural wood designed to blend seamlessly with the landscape. Elara Hale, her hair tied back, a smudge of dirt on her cheek, stood over a set of blueprints discussing a change with her construction foreman. This was the first project of her new firm, Hale Design and Architecture, a firm she had founded with the capital from her settlement. A short distance away, a nanny watched as 2 toddlers, a boy and a girl, chased each other through the grass, their laughter echoing in the crisp air. Leo and Luna. Elara looked up from the plans, a genuine, untroubled smile on her face. She had built this. Not just the house, but the life, the freedom, the peace. She was no longer Julian Thorne's discarded wife or a struggling single mother. She was Elara Hale, a mother, an architect, the master of her own destiny. She had been thrown out with nothing but in losing a gilded cage she had gained the entire world. Her throne was not one of money or power, but one she had built herself, with her own 2 hands on a foundation of resilience, love, and unbreakable strength. Elara's story is a powerful reminder that our lowest moments do not have to define us. It's a testament to the incredible strength that can be found in the face of betrayal and the quiet resilience of a mother's love. She was stripped of her name, her home, and her security, but she never lost her integrity or her spirit. In the end, it wasn't a man or his money that saved her. It was her own talent, her own forgotten strength, and the friendship that stood by her when the world turned its back. Her journey from a Park Avenue penthouse to a Queens basement, and finally to a home of her own design, teaches us that true wealth isn't measured in billions, but in self-worth and independence. If Elara's journey from heartbreak to triumph inspired you, please let us know in the comments below. What part of her story resonated with you the most? Your engagement helps our community grow. And don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you believe in the power of starting over. Share this story with someone who might need a reminder of their own inner strength, and be sure to subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories that touch the heart. Thank you for listening. The air in courtroom 3B was so cold it felt like glass. Elena Sanchez, 8 months pregnant, could barely breathe. Across the aisle, her husband, Marcus Thorne, wasn't just divorcing her, he was trying to destroy her, claiming he was bankrupt. But as he sat there, he couldn't stop smiling. A sly, private smile aimed at his mistress Isabella, sitting in the front row. He smiled as his lawyer called Elena greedy. He smiled as he lied under oath. And he was still smiling when Elena, clutching her stomach, collapsed onto the cold marble floor. But his smile vanished the moment Judge Harding cleared her throat and said, "Mr. Thorne, this court has received a file on your secret account." The hum of the fluorescent lights in courtroom 3B was a high, thin scream beneath the surface of everything. It was a sound Elena Sanchez felt in her teeth. At 8 months pregnant, every sensation was amplified. The hard, unforgiving oak of the bench against her spine, the ache in her swollen ankles, and the suffocating weight of the designer suit she'd bought in another lifetime. A lifetime where Marcus Thorne was a name that meant safety, not the man sitting 30 feet away, meticulously adjusting his silk tie. Elena's lawyer, Sarah Jenkins, a woman with a sharp bob and even sharper eyes, leaned in. "He's going to lie, Elena. We know he's going to lie. His financials are a fantasy. We just have to stay calm and poke the holes. You just breathe." Breathe. It was like trying to breathe water. The heavy doors at the back of the courtroom opened, and a click-clack of heels on marble announced their arrival. It wasn't just Marcus. He was with her. Isabella Rossi. She was everything Elena was not. She was sculpted, tanned, and wearing a tight emerald green dress that screamed money. Her black hair was ironed straight, a sheet of glass falling over her shoulders. She scanned the courtroom with a look of bored entitlement, her eyes landing on Elena's swollen stomach for half a second. A flicker of something amusement crossed her lips before she took her seat directly behind Marcus, a silent, smug declaration of support. Marcus turned just slightly and gave Isabella a look. It wasn't a full smile, not yet. It was a private, shared glance of confidence. "Don't worry, baby. I've got this." Elena felt the baby kick a hard, sharp jab against her ribs, as if the child itself could feel the betrayal. "All rise," the bailiff boomed. Judge Elizabeth Harding entered. She was an older woman, not to be trifled, with her face a roadmap of difficult decisions. She sat, adjusted her robes, and looked over her spectacles. "Case 34B, Thorne v. Thorne. I have reviewed the preliminary filings. Mr. Croft, you may begin." Marcus's lawyer, Alan Croft, a silver-haired shark in a $5,000 suit, stood. "Thank you, Your Honor. What we have here is a simple yet tragic end to a marriage. My client, Mr. Marcus Thorne, a man who has given everything to his business, and his wife, finds himself on the brink of financial ruin. His consulting firm, Thorne Advisory, is facing insolvency due to market downturns. And now Ms. Sanchez, who I must add has not worked a day since their marriage, is seeking to liquidate his last remaining assets. She is demanding the marital home 100% of his non-existent liquid assets and punitive spousal support. It is, in a word, opportunism. She sees a sinking ship and is trying to grab the last life raft." Elena gasped. "That's not quiet, Ms. Sanchez." Judge Harding warned, her voice flat. Elena's hands trembled. Not worked. She had managed their entire life, their properties, their social obligations. She had been his unpaid business manager for 5 years, running the books for his consulting firm, while he networked, which she now knew meant wining and dining Isabella. "Mr. Croft," Judge Harding said, "let's stick to the assets, shall we? Your client's filing claims he has a total liquid worth of $14,000 and over $1.2 million in business debt." "That is correct, Your Honor," Croft said smoothly. "We have the ledgers to prove it." Sarah Jenkins stood. "Your Honor, we will prove that those ledgers are a work of fiction. Mr. Thorne's spending has not decreased. It has simply been rerouted. We contend that Mr. Thorne is hiding substantial marital assets." Judge Harding nodded. "A common and serious allegation, Ms. Jenkins. You will have your chance to prove it. Mr. Croft, call your first witness." "We call Marcus Thorne to the stand." Marcus stood. He straightened his jacket, shot his cuffs, and walked to the stand with the easy confidence of a man who had never faced a single consequence in his life. He passed Elena's table. He didn't look at her. He didn't look at her pregnant belly. He looked past her toward the gallery, where Isabella Rossi was watching him with undisguised adoration. He placed his hand on the Bible, his $10,000 Omega watch glinting under the lights. "I, Marcus Thorne, do solemnly swear." Elena locked eyes with him. Liar. He met her gaze, his eyes perfectly, terrifyingly blank. The void where a husband used to be. It wasn't always like this. Elena closed her eyes for a moment, the drone of Alan Croft's voice fading, and she was back on Willow Creek Drive. She was standing in the empty, sun-drenched foyer of their first home, the smell of fresh paint and sawdust. Marcus had come up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, kissing her neck. "It's perfect, isn't it?" he'd whispered. "Our forever home." He had been so charming, so ambitious. Marcus Thorne, the man who could talk anyone into anything. He'd come from a middle-class family, but he had ambition that burned like a furnace. Elena, whose family had quiet old money from a successful manufacturing business in Chicago, had been captivated by his drive. Her parents had been wary. "He moves too fast, Elena," her father, Richard Sanchez, had warned. "Be careful." But she loved him. She believed in him. When he wanted to start Thorne Advisory, Elena had been his biggest cheerleader. When he suggested he take over the management of her family's investment portfolio to maximize its potential, she'd agreed. "You're the genius, Marcus," she'd said. "The first 5 years were good. They traveled. They built a life." Then came the struggle, the negative pregnancy tests month after month, the hushed, sterile appointments at the fertility clinic, the quiet strain that settled over the house. Marcus grew distant. "It's the stress from work, Lena," he'd say, kissing her forehead. "The market's volatile. I have to work late." Late became a common refrain. Late meant missing dinner. Late meant coming home smelling of expensive whiskey and a faint floral perfume that wasn't hers. Late meant falling asleep on the couch, his phone clutched in his hand, screen down. The discovery was as cliché as it was devastating. It wasn't a text message. It was an email left open on his laptop in the home office. He'd been sloppy. It was a reservation confirmation. The St. Regis Zurich, King Suite. 2 guests, Marcus Thorne and Isabella Rossi. But it wasn't just the hotel. Attached was a wire transfer confirmation. A huge wire transfer, $500, $1,000. It was from an account she didn't recognize, Prometheus Holdings, to a private Swiss bank. She confronted him that night. The memory was seared into her brain. He'd just walked in, tossing his keys into the porcelain bowl by the door. "How was work, Marcus?" she'd asked, her voice shaking. The laptop was open on the kitchen island. "Brutal. Absolutely brutal." He loosened his tie, not looking at her. "I'm going to grab a shower." "Who is Isabella Rossi?" He froze. The mask didn't just slip, it shattered. He turned, and the man she married was gone. In his place was a cold-eyed stranger. "You've been snooping," he hissed. "You're sleeping with her. You're taking her to Zurich. What is Prometheus Holdings, Marcus? What is that $500,000 transfer?" He'd laughed, a cold, sharp sound that echoed in their perfect kitchen. "You really are naive, aren't you? You think this has been real for years. I've been carrying you, Elena. You and your sad little infertility drama. It's exhausting." I'm pregnant, Marcus." She whispered the words. She had been saving the words she thought would fix them, now turning to ash in her mouth. She'd only found out that morning. He stared at her. His face went through a rapid series of calculations. Annoyance, inconvenience, finally contempt. "Well," he'd said, buttoning his jacket, "that's a problem. You should probably call a lawyer, because I'm done." He left. 2 days later, her assets were frozen. The locks on their home were changed. The divorce papers were served by a smug courier listing his assets as negligible and his business as failing. He was petitioning for her to pay him spousal support, citing his financial distress and her significant family wealth, the same wealth he had apparently just wired to Switzerland. A sharp Ms. Sanchez snapped Elena back to the present. Judge Harding was looking at her. "Ms. Sanchez, your attorney asked you a question." Elena blinked, disoriented. Sarah was looking at her with concern. Elena, I asked you to confirm that you handled all the household and many of the business-side bookkeeping duties for Thorne Advisory from 2019 to 2023. Yes. Elena said, her voice hoarse. Yes, I did. I paid all the bills. I managed the payroll until he locked me out of the system 6 months ago. Alan Croft waved his hand dismissively. Bookkeeping. Secretarial work. Your Honor, Sarah interjected. My client holds an MBA in finance from Wharton. She wasn't bookkeeping. She was running his back-end operations. Elena looked at Marcus. He was whispering something to Croft, and they both shared a low, dark chuckle. Mr. Thorne, Alan Croft began, his voice dripping with faux sympathy. Please describe the state of your business, Thorne Advisory. Marcus sighed, a perfect, practiced sound of a man carrying the world on his shoulders. It's a disaster, Alan. The post-pandemic market. My clients pulled out. We're hemorrhaging money. I've had to leverage my personal assets, what little I have left, just to make payroll for my last 2 employees. And your wife's claim that you are hiding assets? Marcus shook his head, looking directly at Judge Harding. Your Honor, I wish I were. I truly do. But there's nothing to hide. My wife, Elena, she comes from a world where money is just there. She doesn't understand cash flow or debt or risk. She thinks because I wear a suit, I must be hiding a pot of gold. The pot is empty. I'm facing Chapter 11. Bankruptcy. He was good. He was so good. His testimony was a performance worthy of an Oscar. He produced bank statements, profit and loss reports, and debt schedules. To the untrained eye, it was a portrait of a failing business. But Elena knew his tricks. She'd taught him some of them. Ms. Jenkins, the judge said, your witness. Sarah Jenkins walked toward the stand, holding a single piece of paper. Mr. Thorne, you claim you're bankrupt. Yet your personal credit card statement from 3 months ago, just after you filed for divorce and claimed indigence, shows a single purchase from Cartier for $72,000. Can you explain that? The courtroom was silent. Marcus didn't flinch. It was a business expense, he said smoothly. A client gift to secure the new Omega account. It was a necessary expenditure. A $72,000 gift for a client while your company is, in your words, hemorrhaging money. You have to spend money to make money, Ms. Jenkins, a lesson Ms. Sanchez never understood. Who was the client, Mr. Thorne? I'm bound by a non-disclosure agreement. How convenient, Sarah muttered. Let's move on. You testified that you are facing bankruptcy. Yet you have not filed for bankruptcy. Why? I'm trying to protect my employees. I'm trying to salvage what I can. It's a matter of pride. Pride, Sarah repeated. Or is it because if you filed for Chapter 11, a trustee would be appointed to forensically examine your actual books, not these interesting documents you've provided the court? Objection, shouted Croft. Counsel is badgering the witness and speculating. Sustained, Judge Harding said. Move on, Ms. Jenkins. Sarah paced. She was losing, and she knew it. Marcus had covered his tracks. The paper trail was pristine. His lies were better than her truth. Mr. Thorne, Sarah said, changing tactics. You are aware that your wife is 8 months pregnant. I am. And you are aware that it is your child. So I've been told. A collective gasp went through the gallery. Elena felt the blood drain from her face. Are you questioning the paternity of this child, Mr. Thorne? Sarah asked, her voice dangerously low. Marcus gave a little shrug. Given the circumstances, the breakdown of the marriage, I just think it's prudent to wait for a paternity test before I'm financially committed to, well, you understand. This was new. A fresh venomous attack he'd saved just for this moment. Elena's vision blurred. He knew. He knew how desperately she'd wanted this baby. He knew they'd been to the clinic together. He was suggesting that after he left her, she had run out, and... He's a monster, Elena whispered, clutching the table. Sarah looked furious. Your Honor, this is a despicable and baseless allegation. We have the fertility clinic records. This is purely to prejudice the court against my client. Judge Harding's eyes narrowed at Marcus. Mr. Thorne, you are under oath. Do you have any evidence to support this insinuation? Just a feeling, Your Honor, Marcus said, the picture of false sincerity. A man's intuition. Elena felt a sharp, twisting pain in her abdomen. It wasn't the baby kicking. It was a cramp, deep and hot. She put a hand over her belly, trying to breathe through it. Calm, Elena, Sarah whispered, returning to the table. He's just trying to get a rise out of you. Don't let him. But the pain was real, and it was getting worse. The defense calls Isabella Rossi to the stand, Alan Croft announced. This was a surprise. Sarah stiffened beside Elena. They're putting the mistress on the stand. Why, it's terrible optics. To paint me as unstable, Elena whispered, the pain in her stomach coiling tighter. To prove the marriage was over long before he got caught. Isabella walked to the stand, her emerald dress rustling. She sat crossed her long legs and smiled sweetly at the judge. She swore her oath, her voice a breathy soprano. Elena's eyes were drawn, as if by a magnet, to the glittering diamond and emerald necklace around Isabella's throat. It was a serpent, its eyes tiny emeralds. It was magnificent, and Elena knew with a certainty that made her sick that it was the $72,000 client gift from Cartier. Ms. Rossi, Croft began, how long have you been in a relationship with Mr. Thorne? About 18 months, sir, Isabella said, fluttering her eyelashes. So your relationship began before Mr. Thorne separated from his wife? Yes, Isabella said without a trace of shame. Marcus was so unhappy. He was in a dead, loveless marriage. Elena, Mrs. Thorne, she was cold. She was obsessed with her family's money and, well, with her infertility issues. It's all she ever talked about. Marcus needed an escape. He needed someone who appreciated his mind, his ambition. Objection, Sarah snapped. Ms. Rossi has no foundation to speak on my client's state of mind or the state of the marriage. This is hearsay and character assassination. Sustained. Ms. Rossi, Judge Harding said, her tone icy. You will confine your answers to your own knowledge and actions. You are not a marriage counselor. Of course, Your Honor, Isabella said, her smile wavering for a second. And during these 18 months, Croft continued, did Mr. Thorne ever give you expensive gifts, lavish you with money he claimed in this court not to have? It was a smart move. Croft was anticipating Sarah's cross-examination. Goodness, no. Isabella laughed. Marcus was very clear. His business was struggling. He was supporting a wife who refused to work. I actually paid for many of our dates. I have my own career, you know. I'm a brand consultant. Elena nearly choked. Brand consultant. She was an Instagram model. So you were not kept by Mr. Thorne? Absolutely not. I love him for him, Isabella said, turning her gaze to Marcus. And then it happened. Marcus, who had been watching Isabella with a soft, proud expression, turned his head. His eyes locked with Elena's. He saw her watching him. He saw her pain, her humiliation, her pregnant belly. He lifted the corner of his mouth in a tiny, almost imperceptible smirk. It was a smirk of pure, unadulterated victory. It said, "I win. I have her, I have your money, and you are nothing. You and that problem you're carrying." It was the single cruelest thing he had ever done. And it broke her. The hot, coiling pain in Elena's abdomen suddenly exploded. It was a blinding, white-hot agony that ripped a sound from her throat. She cried out a sharp, terrified gasp. "Elena!" Sarah whirled around. Elena's hand flew to her stomach. The room tilted. The fluorescent hum screamed. The faces of Marcus, Isabella, the judge, they all blurred into a watercolor of malice and indifference. "He's lying," she managed to gasp, pushing back her chair as she tried to stand. "He's lying about everything." Her legs gave out. The world went black at the edges. Elena Sanchez, 8 months pregnant, crumpled to the cold marble floor of courtroom 3B. The last thing she saw before she lost consciousness was Marcus Thorne. He wasn't rushing to her side. He wasn't shouting for help. He was looking at his lawyer, Alan Croft, with an expression of profound annoyance. The courtroom erupted. "Get a paramedic!" Sarah Jenkins screamed, dropping to her knees beside Elena, fumbling to feel for a pulse. "Order, order in the court." Judge Harding's voice was a cannon shot, but it did little to stop the panic. The bailiff officer Riley was already on his radio shouting for a medical team. In the gallery, people were standing, whispering, pointing, and at the defense table, Marcus Thorne sat frozen. He looked at the scene, his pregnant wife unconscious on the floor, and his first visible instinct was to check his Omega watch. He looked at Alan Croft, exasperated, as if this was a deliberate theatrical ploy by Elena to win sympathy. Isabella Rossi, from the witness stand, simply looked disgusted. She pulled the collar of her dress away from her neck, as if the very air was now contaminated. This tableau, the frantic lawyer, the unconscious wife, the annoyed husband, and the repulsed mistress, was not lost on Judge Elizabeth Harding. Her eyes, cold as steel, burned into Marcus. She saw his impatience. She saw his complete and total lack of concern. "Mr. Thorne," Judge Harding said, her voice quiet, but carrying across the suddenly silent room. Marcus looked up, startled. "You will remain in this courtroom. Mr. Croft, you too. The rest of you clear the gallery. Now." Paramedics, a man and a woman named Kevin and Maria, burst through the doors with a gurney and a full kit. They swarmed Elena, cutting through the noise. "Her name is Elena. She's 34 weeks pregnant." Sarah supplied her voice, trembling. "BP is all over the place. She's tachycardic," Kevin said, strapping an oxygen mask to Elena's face. Elena's eyelids fluttered. She moaned, her hand weakly moving to her stomach. "The baby is the baby. We're going to take care of you, Elena. We're getting you to the hospital right now," Maria said soothingly. "No, I can't," Elena whispered, her voice paper thin. He'll win. He'll take everything. I can't go." "Elena, you have to," Sarah pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "This isn't worth it. He's not worth it." "She's right," Judge Harding said, stepping down from the bench to stand near the group. This was no longer a hearing. It was a crisis. "Ms. Sanchez, your health and the health of your child are the only things that matter. This court will not proceed. We will place a stay on all proceedings." "Your Honor." Elena gasped, grabbing the judge's robe with a strength that surprised everyone. "He's lying. The money, Prometheus Holdings, Zurich. Please, check Prometheus." Judge Harding looked at Elena, then at Sarah, then back at the pale, sweating face on the gurney. She saw not delirium, but a desperate, lucid plea. "Prometheus Holdings," the judge repeated. She nodded slowly. "I understand. You go. We will handle this." As the paramedics lifted the gurney and rushed her out of the courtroom, Elena locked eyes one last time with her husband. The annoyance on his face had finally been replaced by something new. Fear. The moment the doors swung shut, Judge Harding turned to the men left in her courtroom. "Mr. Croft, Mr. Thorne. My chambers, now." The walk to the chambers was silent. When the door closed, Judge Harding rounded on them. "In 22 years on the bench," she seethed, "I have seen liars, cheats, and monsters, but I have never seen a display of depraved indifference as I witnessed today. Your wife, Mr. Thorne, your pregnant wife, collapsed and you checked your watch." "Your Honor, I was in shock," Marcus began, his smooth voice finally cracking. "You were annoyed," Harding snapped. "You were inconvenienced, and you, Mr. Croft, you enabled this. You brought that woman to the stand purely to inflict emotional distress on a high-risk pregnant woman. It was reckless and cruel." "It was a legitimate line of defense," Croft argued. "Save it," Harding said, holding up a hand. She sat at her desk. "This hearing is over for today, but a few things are going to happen. First, I am signing a temporary order granting Ms. Sanchez exclusive use of the marital home effective immediately. Mr. Thorne, you will be escorted there to retrieve your personal effects and nothing more." "You can't do that. The house is leveraged as collateral for my business," Marcus sputtered. "Your business," the judge said, her eyes narrowing. "Ms. Sanchez said a name before she left. Prometheus Holdings. Does that name mean anything to you, Mr. Thorne?" Alan Croft's head snapped toward Marcus. He saw the flicker of panic in his client's eyes. "It's a shell corporation," Marcus said, trying to recover. "Part of my portfolio. It's defunct. Worthless." "Is it?" Judge Harding typed the name into her computer. "Because it's a very active name for a defunct company." She looked up. "I'm going to do something I rarely do. I am on my own authority issuing a subpoena duces tecum for the unredacted financials of Thorne Advisory and this Prometheus Holdings to be delivered to my chambers by 9 a.m. tomorrow. Not your curated fantasy, Mr. Croft. The raw server data. And I am appointing a neutral forensic accountant to review it. Am I clear?" "Your Honor, that is a massive overreach," Croft protested. "Is it, Mr. Croft? Or are you just worried about what I'll find? This court has broad discretion when it suspects perjury and fraudulent concealment of assets, especially when the health of a minor, or in this case an unborn child, is at risk. You will comply, or I will hold you both in contempt." Marcus Thorne was for the first time speechless. The mask was gone. He was just a small, terrified man who had overplayed his hand. "Get out of my courtroom," Judge Harding said. "And Mr. Thorne, pray. Pray that your wife and child are all right." Elena did not go to the hospital. Against all medical advice, she'd had the paramedics take her to a private triage room in the courthouse. The collapse, it turned out, was a severe vasovagal syncope attack, a dramatic, terrifying faint brought on by extreme emotional distress and the baby pressing on a nerve. Her blood pressure was dangerously high, but the baby's heartbeat was strong. "I am not leaving this building," Elena told a frantic Sarah Jenkins. "Not until he's stopped." She spent the next 18 hours in that room, hooked up to a fetal monitor with Sarah coordinating from the law library. Sarah's team worked through the night, energized by the judge's new aggressive stance. But the real break didn't come from them. At 8:15 a.m., a man arrived at Judge Harding's chambers. He was not a lawyer. He was a nervous-looking man in a rumpled suit clutching a briefcase. His name was David Chen. I was the CFO for Marcus Thorne. David told the judge, who had granted him an immediate ex parte meeting. I worked for him for 6 years. I built his company with him. What happened? Judge Harding asked her recorder on. He was always creative. But a year ago it got dark. He asked me to set up a shell corporation, Prometheus Holdings. He said it was for tax advantages. Then he started moving money, not just his money, client money, and his wife's money. David Chen took a shaky breath. Elena's family portfolio. He was managing it. He was systematically liquidating her assets, blue-chip stocks, bonds, and funneling the cash into Prometheus, then wiring it to a private bank in Zurich. He was robbing her blind. Millions. Why are you telling me this now, Mr. Chen? Because when I confronted him, he fired me. He threatened to frame me for it. He said he'd ruin me. And he did. He blackballed me. I can't get a job anywhere. I saw the court docket. I saw he was claiming bankruptcy. The man is sitting on at least $8 million of his wife's stolen money. I have the real ledgers, the server data, the wire transfer codes. It's all on this. He clicked his briefcase open and produced a single encrypted USB drive. The account in Zurich. It requires 2-factor authentication. His phone and this. A biometric key. He thinks I destroyed it. I didn't. He placed the small metallic key on the judge's desk. At 10:00 a.m., Judge Harding reconvened her court. Elena was there against Sarah's protests, sitting in a wheelchair next to the plaintiff's table, a paramedic standing quietly in the corner. She looked pale, but resolute. Marcus and Alan Croft were at their table. Marcus looked smug again. The 18-hour reprieve had restored his confidence. He'd produced doctored server data just as the judge requested. He believed he was still in control. We are back on the record in Thorne v. Thorne, Judge Harding began. Mr. Croft, this court has reviewed the data you provided. It appears to match your client's initial filings. Marcus smiled. He looked at Isabella in the gallery. She smiled back. However, the judge continued, this court was also visited this morning by a Mr. David Chen, a name I believe you both know. Marcus's blood ran cold. The color drained from his face. Alan Croft, for his part, looked genuinely confused. Who? Your client's former CFO, Mr. Croft. The one he fired for incompetence 3 months ago. Mr. Chen provided this court with some discrepancies, namely the actual server data for Thorne Advisory and a shell company called Prometheus Holdings. Judge Harding nodded to the bailiff. Plug in the drive. The large monitor on the courtroom wall, usually used for video testimony, flickered to life. It was a bank interface. Banque Privée de Zurich. This, Judge Harding said, is the Prometheus Holdings account. Mr. Chen was kind enough to provide the login credentials and the biometric security key. Objection. Croft leaped to his feet. Your Honor, this is completely inadmissible. It's hacked. It's stolen. It's fruit of the poisonous tree. We haven't had time to review. Overruled, Mr. Croft. This is a bench trial, and I am admitting it under the exception of evidence of a crime fraud in progress, and Mr. Thorne's perjury. The judge nodded to the clerk, who navigated to the account summary. Count balance, $8, $451, 209.34 USD. Isabella Rossi gasped. Alan Croft stared, his mouth open. He turned to his client. Marcus, what is this? Marcus was sweating, his eyes darting between the screen and the exit. It's not mine. It's a client's. It's confidential. Oh, it's yours, Mr. Thorne, the judge said. Or rather, it was yours, because Mr. Chen also provided the transaction history, the source of these funds. The screen changed. A transaction log. Line after line. Transfer from R. Sanchez Family Trust. $300,000. Liquidation of Elena Thorne Sanchez Holdings. $500,000. Transfer from R. Sanchez Family Trust. $250,000. It went on for pages. It was a systematic, brutal plundering of Elena's entire inheritance, the money her father had warned her to protect. Elena began to weep quiet, racking sobs. Not for the money, but for the sheer, calculated malice. He hadn't just left her. He had intended to leave her pregnant and penniless, having stolen her past and her future. "But it's not just the deposits, Mr. Thorne," Judge Harding said, her voice like ice. "It's the withdrawals." A new screen. Wire transfer. $1,200,000. Rossi Properties, LLC. Purchase of Condo Unit 14B. The Olympian Wire Transfer. $110,000. Manhattan Motors Purchase. Mercedes G-Wagon. Wire Transfer. $72,000. Cartier Jewelers. Judge Harding looked at Isabella Rossi. "Ms. Rossi, that is a beautiful necklace. I trust you'll enjoy it for the next few hours before the court seizes it as a fraudulently transferred asset." Isabella's hands flew to the serpent necklace. Her face was a mask of horror. "Marcus, you told me you were rich," she shrieked, standing up. "You told me that was your money." "Sit down, Ms. Rossi, or I will have you removed," the judge ordered. Alan Croft slammed his briefcase shut. "Your Honor, I must immediately motion to withdraw as counsel. My client has perpetrated a fraud upon this court and upon me. He has committed perjury. I cannot and will not represent him a moment longer." "Motion granted, Mr. Croft. You are excused." Croft didn't even look at Marcus. He just walked out of the courtroom. Marcus Thorne was alone at the table, staring at the $8.4 million on the screen that was no longer his. "Mr. Thorne," Judge Harding said, "you stand before this court a liar, a perjurer, and a thief. You have emotionally abused your pregnant wife. You have attempted to defraud this court, and you have in the process committed multiple felonies." Marcus just stared, mute. "This hearing is concluded." The silence that followed Alan Croft's exit was a living thing. It was heavier than the oak-paneled walls, more absolute than the stone floor. Marcus Thorne was left utterly alone at the defense table. A captain on a ship that had not just sunk, but had been vaporized beneath his feet. He stared at the empty chair beside him, then at the 8.4 million figure still glowing on the monitor, a number that represented both his triumph and his damnation. Elena sat in her wheelchair, a paramedic hovering discreetly in the corner. Her hand was pressed flat against her belly where her child was kicking a frantic, steady rhythm against her palm. She felt an unearthly calm settle over her. The pain was gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. Judge Harding put her glasses back on. She looked down from the bench, not at a litigant, but at a specimen. "Mr. Thorne, you are now representing yourself. Do you have anything to say before this court renders its judgment?" Marcus opened his mouth. A dry, rasping sound came out. This is a—" He looked at Elena, his eyes wide with a new, dawning terror. "A misunderstanding, Elena. Tell them this is a mistake. We can work this out." Elena met his gaze. The man she had loved, the man who had charmed her, the man who had whispered forever in her ear was gone. This creature, this hollow-eyed shell, was all that was left. She gave a single, almost imperceptible shake of her head. "No, Marcus," she whispered. "No more." The judge's gavel struck the block, the sound like a rifle shot. "The time for working things out is long past. The judgment of this court is as follows." Marcus flinched, gripping the edge of the table. On the matter of the divorce case 34B, Thorn v. Thorn, the divorce is granted. Based on the overwhelming evidence of, well, let's call it a preponderance of sins, I am granting this divorce on the grounds of adultery, fraudulent concealment, and extreme emotional cruelty. Elena let out a breath she felt she'd been holding for a year. It was the first domino. On the matter of marital and separate assets, the judge continued, her voice a clinical, precise instrument. This court finds that Mr. Thorn has engaged in a systematic criminal conspiracy to defraud his wife, Elena Sanchez, of her personal separate property. The funds contained within the entity Prometheus Holdings, totaling $8,451,209.34, are hereby declared the sole and separate property of Miss Elena Sanchez. No. Marcus half rose from his chair. No. That's my business. I earned that. You stole that, Mr. Thorn. Judge Harding snapped, her voice dropping an octave. You stole it from your wife, you stole it from her family, and you did it all while lying to her, to your partners, and to this court. You will not see 1 cent of that money. The judge nodded to the clerk. A temporary injunction is in place. By the end of this day, that account will be frozen, seized, and its contents transferred to a trust established for Ms. Sanchez. Now as to the marital home on Willow Creek Drive. Harding continued, looking at her notes. The down payment and subsequent mortgage payments were all sourced from Ms. Sanchez's family trust, the very trust you plundered. Therefore, the home is awarded in its entirety to Ms. Sanchez. What about my company? Marcus whispered, his face ashen. Your company, Thorn Advisory, is a facade. It is hereby dissolved effective immediately. A receiver will be appointed to liquidate its assets, the office furniture, the art you bought with stolen money, everything. The proceeds will be used to pay for Ms. Sanchez's legal fees, which I imagine after today will be substantial. Judge Harding looked at him, her face devoid of any emotion. Mr. Thorn, after the receivership, you will be left with your clothing, your watches, and any personal effects you can carry out of the home, to which you will be escorted by a sheriff's deputy to retrieve with a 15-minute time limit. You are for all legal and financial purposes destitute. He was gaping, a fish pulled from water, suffocating in the open air of his own ruin. Then the judge's tone softened, but it only made her words more devastating. And now, the most important matter, the matter of the child. Elena's heart stopped. Mr. Thorn, the judge said, leaning forward, you stood on that stand under oath, and with a casual cruelty that this court has rarely seen, you insinuated that your wife was unfaithful. You questioned the paternity of your own unborn child. You did this not because you believed it, but as a weapon. You did it to inflict pain, to poison her character, to gain leverage in a financial dispute. She took off her glasses, rubbing the bridge of her nose. A man who would use his unborn child as a tactical pawn is not a father. He is a predator. A man who would smile at his mistress while his pregnant wife collapses. He is not a man at all. Marcus was shaking his head, silent tears of self-pity streaming down his face. Please, no. This court's primary duty is to the welfare of the child, and it is this court's finding that you, Mr. Thorn, represent the single greatest threat to that child's welfare. Therefore, this court awards 100% sole legal and physical custody to Ms. Elena Sanchez. Elena burst into a sob, a raw, ragged sound of profound relief. The money was one thing. This was everything. But it does not end there, Judge Harding said. Your vile accusation has convinced me that any contact would be detrimental to the child. Your parental rights are hereby terminated. You will have no contact, no visitation, no custodial rights. You will not see this child. You will not have any say in her life, her health, or her education. On the birth certificate, the father's name will be listed as unknown. Do you understand me, Mr. Thorne? You have by your own hand erased yourself." The finality of it hung in the air. "And now we come to your future," the judge said. "This court is not the end of your journey. This is a civil court, but you have committed grievous crimes." Marcus looked up, confusion mixing with his terror. "What? You have committed perjury under oath. You have submitted fraudulent documents to this court. You have, by the admission of your own CFO, Mr. David Chen, committed felony wire fraud and embezzlement on a massive scale. I am therefore referring this entire file, the testimony of Mr. Chen, the bank records from Zurich, the fraudulent filings, and the transcript of your own perjured testimony to the district attorney's office for immediate criminal prosecution." "No!" Marcus finally roared his terror, giving way to a cornered animal's rage. "You can't! This is a divorce. This is a private matter. You made it a public matter when you committed felonies, Mr. Thorne." Judge Harding looked past him to the bailiff at the door. "Officer Riley." The large bailiff stepped forward, his hand on his hip. "Mr. Thorne is a clear and present flight risk. He has access to unknown funds, as does his associate, Ms. Rossi. He has already demonstrated a willingness to flee, evidenced by the Swiss account. Therefore, this court is remanding him to custody effective immediately. Bail is set at $10 million. The irony was acidic, a number he almost had, but now was as unreachable as the moon. "Stand up, Mr. Thorne," Officer Riley said, his voice a low rumble. "No." Marcus scrambled backward, his chair toppling over. "No, you can't do this to me." He turned his eyes wild and locked on Elena, the true target. "Elena, you did this!" He screamed, his face a grotesque mask of purple rage. You planned this, you and that rat, David!" He lunged toward her table. Officer Riley was on him in a second, grabbing him by his $5,000 suit jacket and spinning him around, slamming him against the table with a force that knocked the breath from his lungs. "You bitch!" he shrieked, his voice cracking. "I gave you everything, you were nothing. You were a sad, barren society wife. I gave you a life. I gave you a life." Click, click. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was the loudest sound Elena had ever heard. Officer Riley hauled him to his feet. The swaggering, confident tycoon was gone. In his place was a sweating, disheveled, cuffed man. "You'll regret this, Elena," he spat, spittle flying from his lips. "When you're all alone, you'll hear from me. This isn't over. I'll get you. If it's the last. Get him out." Judge Harding ordered, her voice flat with disgust. Marcus was dragged, struggling and cursing from the courtroom. The heavy doors slammed shut, cutting off his threats. And then, silence. The paramedic rushed to Elena's side. "Ma'am, your blood pressure. We need to, ma'am." Elena was shaking. Not from fear. Not anymore. It was an earthquake of adrenaline, a year of terror, stress, and humiliation, finally leaving her body. Sarah Jenkins, her own face stained with tears, dropped to her knees in front of the wheelchair and grabbed her hands. "It's over." Sarah wept, laughing and crying at the same time. "Elena, it's over. You're safe. You won. You won everything." Elena looked at her lawyer, then at the bench. Judge Harding had stepped down and was walking toward her. She was no longer a judge. She was just a woman. "Ms. Sanchez," Judge Harding said, her voice gentle. "You endured a trial few could. You did not break. I almost did, Elena whispered, her voice hoarse. When I fell, falling is not breaking, the judge replied, placing a hand on Elena's shoulder. Breaking is when you don't get back up. And you, Ms. Sanchez, you are standing. She nodded toward Elena's stomach. Both of you, go to the hospital. Have that baby. Give that child the life this man tried to steal from you. And do not for 1 second look back. 1 week later. The room didn't hum. It was bright-filled not with cold fluorescent light, but with the warm, buttery glow of the afternoon sun. It didn't smell of old varnish and fear. It smelled of baby powder, fresh flowers, and milk. Elena Sanchez, her hair brushed and her face clear, rocked her daughter. Lily Sanchez. She was tiny, perfect, and had a full head of dark hair. She made small cooing sounds in her sleep. Elena hadn't stopped looking at her for 3 days. The door opened, and Sarah Jenkins peeked in, a grin splitting her face. She was carrying a teddy bear the size of a small child and a stack of newspapers. "Well, hello, front page news," Sarah whispered, setting the bear in a chair. She held up the New York Post. The headline was "Blistering Thorn in the Slammer." Wife-stealing tycoon charged in $8 million fraud. "It's everywhere," Sarah said, her voice gleeful. Marcus Thorne was denied bail. The judge deemed him an extreme flight risk and a danger to his victim. That's you. He's at Rikers in general population. His life as he knew it is over. What about Isabella? Elena asked, her voice quiet. She didn't really care, but it was a loose end. Fled, Sarah snorted. The marshals went to the condo, your condo, by the way. The court seized it as a fraudulent transfer, and she was gone. Word is she's back in Miami trying to sell the G-Wagon before it's repossessed. She's being sued by the state and by the bank. She bet on the wrong horse and lost the entire farm. And David Chen. The DA gave him full immunity. He's the star witness for the prosecution. I heard he's already got a book deal. The Man Who Took Down Thorne, or something dramatic. Sarah pulled a chair closer, her voice softening. He's facing 15 to 20 years, Elena. At minimum. With the evidence, he'll almost certainly get the maximum. It's really truly done. Elena just nodded, her gaze returning to the tiny, perfect face of her daughter. That last thing he did, Sarah said, her anger returning. That lie about paternity. It was so pointlessly, monstrously cruel. I'll never understand it. Elena looked up from her daughter, and she smiled. It wasn't the tired, pained grimace Sarah had gotten used to. It was a real, slow, brilliant smile. It lit up her whole face. That's the funny part, Sarah. Funny? Sarah asked, nonplussed. Elena, it was despicable. No, it's objectively funny, Elena said. She adjusted Lily in her arms, shifting her to her other shoulder. When we were at the fertility clinic, all those years, the tests finally came back. It wasn't me, Sarah. It was never me. Sarah's eyes went wide. What? It was him, Marcus Thorne. 0 sperm count, isospermia, completely irreversibly sterile. Sarah's jaw dropped. But, how? Oh, he bribed the first doctor, Elena said, her voice light. Had the records doctored. He couldn't stand the thought of the world knowing he was less of a man. He told me the problem was unexplained. He let me believe for 5 years that my body was the one failing, that I was the broken one. So, Lily, Sarah breathed, looking at the baby with new eyes, is 100% mine and 100% from donor profile 34B, a very nice, very anonymous biology professor from Chicago with a clean bill of health and good teeth. Sarah was speechless. "Why, my God, Elena, why didn't you say anything in court? We could have destroyed him with that, and let him taint that too," Elena asked, her smile fading just a little. "Let him drag the clinic, the donor, my daughter's origin, through his filth. No, she was the one thing he couldn't touch. My one secret, my one piece of power. I wanted him to go to prison for the crimes he did commit, not for a lie about a child that was never ever his." Elena looked down at Lily, who was stretching her tiny arms. "His final pathetic attempt to hurt me was by denying a child he could never have created in the first place. He was so busy, so obsessed with stealing my past. He didn't realize he had absolutely no part in my future." Sarah Jenkins stared at her client, then at the baby. A slow, amazed laugh bubbled up. "My God, Elena, you're incredible." "No," Elena said, kissing Lily's forehead. "I'm just a mother." She turned to the window, the sunlight washing over them both. The courtroom was a bad dream. The fluorescent hum was gone. This was real. This was the beginning. Justice in the end was served, not just by the law, but by the truth. Marcus Thorne lost his company, his freedom, and the woman he tried to destroy. But Elena, she won. She won her freedom, she won her future, and she won the one thing that mattered more than all the money in Zurich, her daughter Lily. What did you think of Marcus's downfall? Was the judge too harsh, or did he get exactly what he deserved? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you love stories where a strong woman overcomes the ultimate betrayal and justice is finally served, then please hit that like button. It helps our channel more than you know. And if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss another story of lies, secrets, and an ending you won't see coming. Thanks for listening.